Hi guys, thanks for checking in. This is Anthony here from DIYautotech, Automotive Diagnosis and Repair. I'm a California licensed and certified general automotive technician. Today we're going to be talking about a very simple topic, oil changes. This is something a lot of you guys probably do at home and a lot of you guys do out in the field as well. Today's vehicle is going to include a full service oil change and a general vehicle inspection. This is something you should do on all your cars at home and all your customer cars out in the field. I encourage you to stick around for the entirety of the video. You might learn something, as I'm going to throw in some little tips and tricks to both save you time and just some things that you might not know about oil changes in general. First things first, let's look at the tools that we're going to need for today in order to perform this job at home. And some things to do before we get our hands dirty with oil. So this is what my at-home oil change kit's going to look like. We're going to have our drive-on jacks here. This gives us 6 inches of clearance, and we're not having to deal with getting on the floor and jacking the vehicle up, as that takes a lot of time. The oil of choice, that's going to be your preference and depending on your year, make, and model of vehicle. We're going to also have the oil filter. We want to buy a high quality oil filter, and this oil filter actually comes with a sticker so that you can write your mileage on there. We'll have to have some sort of catch basin here, a clean funnel that we're going to clean out with some rags. Obviously a ratchet, 1/4 inch to 3/8. 3/8 usually to break the bolts loose, and the associated socket that you need. Oil filter wrench is always a plus. You're going to usually need those to get the oil filter off. I always use gloves, and if you prefer to use safety goggles, you may. It's always a good idea to have some extra rags around and some paper towels. I always like to write a work order for any vehicle I'm working on, so I'll always have a pen and a little shop paper here with me. I'll have something to check my tire pressure with and a tire depth gauge, flashlight to do an under hood and under vehicle inspection. And if you don't buy a nice oil filter that comes with a sticker, you can always use some clear or Scotch tape with a Sharpie to write your date, mileage, and type of oil necessary. Another important piece of gear is going to be these wheel chocks behind me here. I've got 4 of them, so 2 for each tire. Once we get to driving onto those ramps, we want to secure the vehicle in place. Another useful tool would be a headlamp. Those are always beneficial when you're in dark, unlit areas, like maybe your home garage. So now the next thing we want to do is we want to write our engine mileage on the tape or on the supplied sticker from the filter. We want to get that out of the way first so that our hands aren't oily once we're done with the oil change. Once that's complete, we're going to go ahead and drive onto those jacks. Let's do that now. So on my stickers, I like to write the date that I changed the oil. Under the current mileage, I'll just put the mileage that I'm going to change the oil at. And I like to put the weight of the oil here. So I don't really follow the way that the sticker's set up, but if you want to do it that way, you can. This is just how I set mine up. Put the new sticker on before our hands get greasy. Once you get the vehicle to full operating temperature and before you put it on the drive-on jacks, it is a good idea to check the engine oil like we're doing here to make sure you haven't burned any. If you have burned a quart or two over the span of 3,000 to 5,000 miles, it's a good idea to check on it regularly and make sure this doesn't happen again. If it does, you either have an oil leak or you need to move up in the weight of your oil, say from 0W20 to 5W30. If your engine has over 75,000 miles, I would suggest that you do bump up in that weight just as a precaution. It's always wise to give the vehicle a really solid shake test when you're on these jacks before you start it. That's safe to get under. Alright, we're going to remove the fill cap here. Loosen it off. I'm just going to look on the other side to make sure there's no bad deposits or milky substances. It looks good. And I'm just going to kind of leave that loosely floating there, so air can get in there when we drain the pan. I'm also going to pull the dipstick tube here and just let it sit idly on top of the engine. That way we don't have a vacuum effect. Alright guys, right here we have our engine oil drain bolt. For a lot of people, it's hard to differentiate whether it's a transmission or the engine drain pan. Just remember, on a rear-wheel drive car, it's going to be the one most forward of the vehicle. If you're in a front-wheel drive vehicle, you just need to look at which side the engine is associated on, whether it's more passenger predominant or driver's side predominant. Obviously, check your owner manual. You might be able to find information there, or resources online, such as vehicle forums. All right, guys, we've got a drain pan here. We're going to remove the plug on the inside of the pan so that the oil has somewhere to drain into. and the little air petcock valve there. We have our ratchet with the appropriate socket, and all I want to do is just take that and break it loose, which sometimes takes a little bit of effort. You want to get your pan directly underneath. This could get a little messy, and it is going to be a little hot too. We're going to pull this out pretty quickly here, and we're going to hold on to the bolt. Okay, I can feel it's about to loosen all the way out. We're going to go let that drain. Take a look at the bolt. The threads look really nice on this drain bolt. We still have our crush washer intact, so you can replace these with every oil change. This one looks a little beat up, so we're gonna go ahead and replace it. And once that oil stops dripping behind us, we'll just run a little bit of oil on the threads here, run it back in hand tight, and then torque it down. Hand tighten this back into the oil pan so that you don't cross thread anything. All right guys, very important note here when we're tightening up this oil bolt, but you wanna come in and just kind of hand tighten it. You can see I'm just doing it just by the base here. Just kind of tightening. And it hits a nice wall there. Once we hit that wall where it's tight, I'm just gonna take it and just give it a nice little bit of turn until it's nice and snug. That's it, that's all we need. If you have a new crush washer, you might have to turn that a lot more as it's crushing the washer, but you'll feel that wall that you hit, and you don't want to strip out your oil pan, especially if it's still piping hot. Since we have our drain bolt torqued back up, everything's dry underneath. Engine now has no oil, so we need to refill that. We also need to replace the oil filter. So I've got a K&N oil filter here, and the reason being is it's got a hex nut on the back for my hard to reach oil filter location. My recommendation to you is if you have anything other than a vertical drop mounted oil filter that's either upside down like this or straight up and down like this, you're more than likely gonna have some residual leakage when you go to remove this oil filter. So you wanna have some rags like these, as you can see. So when you go to unscrew it, the rag catches most of the oil, and you pull both those out together. You always want to make sure that this black seal on the filter remains on the old filter when it comes off, and that it's not stuck to your engine block. You also want to check on the inside of the oil filter. You won't be able to see it, but there is a little bypass valve in there, so that if the filter gets clogged, oil can shoot straight through without getting filtered, so that your engine doesn't blow up from low oil pressure. Always replace the filter with a known good one, and for literally $5 extra, you can get a filter that's meant for full synthetic or a filter that's meant for 15,000 miles or more. So I would really suggest that you put in a new filter, a high quality filter, and you do it every time you're doing an oil change. I'm gonna pour some brand new engine oil in here. I wanna saturate those paper fibers on the inside. I'm gonna fill it all the way to the top. That way the threads get some oil and this seal gets some oil as well, because we're gonna wanna oil that seal before we put it on the engine block. Ask, well, what specific oil do I need for my specific year, make, and model of vehicle? Well, that's gonna be found in your user manual. Your vehicle has a specific engine, whether it's turbocharged or naturally aspirated, and each of those engines will require a different requirement of the oil. And so on the back of any can of oil, you're gonna see all these different requirements, what the oil meets and or exceeds. And if they match the certifications specified and needed by your car, you know that this is the right oil for your vehicle. Now, when we talk about oil filters, it's a little more generic. You just wanna pick a filter that either matches your non-synthetic or synthetic oil. In this case, we're using synthetic high mileage oil, so we're gonna use an oil filter specified for synthetic oil. See, but my oil filter is tucked way back in here under the vehicle. So this is why I use a K&N filter. Got the hex nut on the back so we can unscrew it. And unscrew this guy just to where it's hand tight. Keeping in mind the filter is hot. We have the drain pan underneath, but we're still gonna leak. And there we have it. So as you can see here, the seal is intact, still part of the filter. So in my vehicle's case, the oil filter sits in about an upside down position. So it sits at about right there. So we're gonna dump out the excess new oil. So now when we screw this on, we're not gonna get a bunch of excess leaking. Filling this oil filter as much as you can, you're already starting that process. Plus, this gets you in a good habit of lubricating your seal and lubricating your threads before you screw this on the vehicle. Find the threads, easily thread it on. It's gonna be very easy as it's not a steep pitch. We'll thread it on until it's hand tight, and then we're gonna grab our rag, wipe our hand off, and we're gonna take this around the oil filter just to snug it up. Since your hands and your filter might be oily, this will help get a good grip. I'm just snugging that up, hand tight, but as tight as I can with my hands. It's gonna help condense that seal down and stop anything from leaking. Sorry, there's no good way to get an angle on that in this vehicle. But if your oil filter is a little easier to get to than mine, you can actually use an oil filter wrench. A lot of the times those things will be on there so tight after sitting there for 3,000 to 5,000 miles that you can't hand and tighten them. Usually that's the case. And all it does is it's gonna clamp around that oil filter and you're gonna use it as a grip to just turn it counterclockwise. That way you can then loosen it by hand. The reason that I don't use this on my vehicle is there's specifically no room to even get an oil filter wrench in there. So we'll remove the cap, we'll put the funnel in like that, and we'll fill our engine oil. Since we put a new filter in, this vehicle will take a full 5.2 quarts. Okay, I got the same engine oil here, just a 1 quart version, and we'll just put in our 0.2 here. There's measurements on the side of your bottles, guys, so that'll tell you both on these small 1 quarts and on your 5 quart jugs. We'll move this out of the way, put our cap back on, and just snug it up. I like to wipe the oil off there as well, for any residual you may have dripped. Take our dipstick, clean it off, put it back into the dipstick tube. Alright guys, we have finished filling the vehicle, and technically we have finished our oil change. So we've drained the oil pan, removed the old oil filter and replaced it, and we've replaced our 5.2 quarts of old oil with 5.2 quarts of new oil. So that would complete the oil change. Now my question to you is this: we're still on drive on jacks. Would it be appropriate to check our engine oil right now to see if it's filled? The answer is absolutely not. So to check your engine oil, you need to be on completely flat ground, or at least as flat as you can get it. So on an angle like this of maybe 10-20 degrees, we could probably look about a quart low. I've seen that happen before. So I'm not going to check it up here on the stand. I have faith in my user manual, and I have faith that I have put in the correct amount of engine oil. So I know for a fact I can start this vehicle, we can get it off the jack stands and onto flat ground before we check that dipstick to make sure that we're full. It also helps to run the vehicle for 10 to 15 seconds, get that engine oil to cycle through the engine and drip back down. And this way we can check for an appropriate amount of engine oil in the engine once it has cycled through the engine. But before I take this vehicle off the jack stands, there's a couple things I want to do. Number one, I want to grab a flashlight and I want to do a detailed underhood inspection. I want to take a look at all my drive pulleys, my belts for wear or any rust indicators on those pulleys. I want to check every single fluid under this hood. I want to check brake fluid, power steering fluid, engine coolant once the vehicle's cooled down, obviously the engine oil, transmission oil, your windshield wiper fluid reservoir. So I want to check these things to make sure everything's within normal limits. If they're not full, then I know we're going to have a problem somewhere down the line here. I'm going to also run a rag over all these items and keep them clean so that I can see right through the plastic containers. For my coolant, I'm not going to unscrew the coolant cap here. There's warnings on every single label that says not to, obviously since it's a pressurized system when it's hot. What we can do is though, we can go to the reservoir and pop that cap. I can take a look inside, full level, so that's fine as well. I will check the radiator for any cracks, especially along the neck here, those are common. Make sure my cap is tight and my hoses are secured. Take a look at my radiator hoses here. Make sure I don't have any crusty buildup or any cracks in those, both upper and lower. I'm gonna make sure that my caps are on for my oil fill cap and my dipstick tube. Take a look at my batteries to make sure there's not a bunch of excess acid or corrosion on there, and that the cables, my 12-volt cables, are nice and tight, which they are. I'll do a quick visual inspection of the cables and pulleys under the engine bay and vacuum lines, etc., fuel lines, to make sure I don't see any obvious leaks. My ABS system, I'll look for leaks down there as that fluid is corrosive. You can check my power steering fluid here as well. We'll pull that cap off, take a look, and I can see that it's full there as well. We'll go ahead and check the transmission fluid in another video. I'll show you how to do that, but we want to have the engine running, and there's specific instructions to check your transmission fluid correctly, so you don't want to miss out on that video. And then lastly, we can pull out the air filter, take a look at the air filter, see if it's clean or not. Got a prime example of a clean filter here. You can see that it's all white, so this looks good. It's a good filter. We can put this back in the truck. While you're underneath your vehicle, you want to take that light again, and we want to look all over underneath there. We're looking for leaks, cracks in the frame, rodents living under there chewing on your wire. You want to look at all that stuff. Take a look at your brakes. We want to look at the disc brake pad thickness, and we want to look at the rotors, make sure they're not scoring. This is a good place to also check your tires, so you can look at the tires on the inside and of course on the outside and on the treads as well. Lastly, we'll go ahead and check our tire pressure, check the PSI of our tires, and make sure they're within normal limits. So guys, that is where all these little extra tools will come into play checking tire pressure, using a flashlight to do an under hood and under vehicle inspection, and a tire depth type gauge. You can also buy one for your brake pads as well, but usually you can just go visually off those. And a lot of your newer cars will have wear indicators anyways, where you'll start hearing them squeal. All right guys, now to get rid of this old oil that's in this jug here, pop that little cap, let it breathe. We're just gonna dump our old oil back into this container here. What we can do with this container is then we can take it to like a AutoZone, Jiffy Lube, those sort of places. They'll actually recycle that oil for free so long as it's just engine oil. So we'll go ahead and empty that out slowly to our old can. This is also a safe way to measure how much engine oil you've actually pulled out of your vehicle. So now the only thing left to do is pull those wheel chocks out from behind the tires, roll this baby off the jack stands, and we're gonna check our engine oil to make sure that we have enough, that it's not underfilled or overfilled. And that will complete the oil change and the under hood, under vehicle inspection for today. If you're working at your own shop or you're gonna be taking this vehicle for the long haul with you, I suggest you create a little PDF file or some sort of work order. That way you can write in what you've done, the parts you've used, part numbers, pricing, etc. This is gonna help keep a detailed vehicle history for you, and when it comes time to resell that bad boy, this stuff will pay dividends for you in your resale value. Wipe off our oil dipstick here. Run it back in, let it sit for a second. We're gonna check our oil level. Probably won't focus on screen, but you can see we're just at that top dot there, which means we are completely full. But if you have a dual tripometer like trip A, trip B here, you want to reset one of them so that you can use that as your oil change interval. So on most of your vehicles, they're going to be between 3,000 and 5,000 miles. I wouldn't go any more than that, even if it says you can on the bottle. I would suggest you change your oil at least every 3,000 to 5,000 miles, especially if you're a turbocharged or supercharged application. So on this vehicle, I've reset my tripometer, and I know in 5,000 miles, I'm gonna replace this with fresh engine oil and a fresh filter. So, is an oil change a project that you should do at home? I say yes. If you're willing to, you have the know-how and the tools, it's a great idea to do it yourself. And you're not gonna get ripped off by someone who's telling you have all kinds of leaks and all kinds of problems that you may or may not have. All right guys, now it's time to clean up. I'm gonna go ahead and put all this stuff away. Please leave a comment below if you want to see some more videos about how to do an underhood inspection, how to check those serpentine belts, take a look at that timing belt, look at your spark plugs, wires, make sure all your fluids are within normal limits, and how to look for a leak and how to diagnose and find where that item is leaking. Let me know if you want to see that stuff. I want to see comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you on the next vehicle repair.